All right, listen, man. It's the Value Podcast where valuable people attract people of value. I'm Jamel Jackson, your relationship mechanic. I focus on preparing, evaluating, and giving you the tools you need to maintain healthy relationships. Today, I got some iconic people on here, man. Some dynamic people. What's going on, Tanya?
You see, I smiled time when you said it. I'm doing good. Thank you. I appreciate you having me. I really do. Thank you.
What was it? Today's Thursday. How's your week been so far?
It's been great. It's been really great. I celebrate 41 years tomorrow. So
Tomorrow your birthday.
yes, honey.
Clap it up for the
I'm
birthday.
talking about okay.
Clap it up for the birthday. Clap it up for the birthday.
You know, I look 21, but you know.
They say it's the new 30. So
And we got Quest.
yes, sir.
What's going on, man?
I don't know. I'm enjoying this little area we out here. You know what I'm saying? Like this, I'm really at home right now. So I just want, wherever we going today, it's fitting to be really bomb because I feel really good. That's what I'm just telling you.
Okay, and man, y'all know everything I talk about on here is just centered around relationships.
Oh yeah, no doubt.
Giving people tools.
I love it.
And today, you guys that are listening, today you guys that are viewing, I brought some relationship scientists on here, man. People that know what they talk about, people that have been tested through the fire.
The check is in the mail, by the way.
Yo, well, today let's talk about these boundaries.
Yeah, let's go.
How important are boundaries in relationships? Just with a heavy. Well, you know what? Let's do this. How would you define boundaries, Tanya?
I think, first of all, boundaries aren't ultimatums. And I think that's very important to identify because that word can be very triggering. And so when we eliminate the fact that it isn't an ultimatum and it's more about a set of guidelines that determine what you will accept, what you won't accept, and what is just not even, that's unacceptable across the board. So I think when we look at it from that perspective, we can live in the boundaries that we know we need to have to live a quality of life. Because I think that many people don't live in boundaries that they know is in the betterment of their well-being because maybe of the fear of not being liked or not being accepted because of that. So that's how I feel about it.
That's interesting because even growing up, even when you said that growing up, there was a lot of, the way that I saw boundaries was as control.
Right.
You know, like this is trying to prohibit me from living the best life or having a fun, exciting time.
Exactly.
Don't go this far off the block. When the street light is like this, you be right here. So even if I didn't have an in-depth understanding of boundaries, I still saw it as a little bit of restriction. And so even when the authorities came through, they were bringing boundaries. Yeah. Don't you do this. And this is good. There was already some rebelliousness working inside of me that wanted to break the law and break the boundaries. Right. Why is that, Quest?
Well, I mean, let's just take a pause for a moment. And I wanted to just touch back before we attack the why. Tanya said some heavy stuff a while ago, and I just wanted to take it a little bit deeper as to what boundaries do for us, right? When you said what the definition of boundaries is, immediately I was on my phone here, and I went to what the Webster's Dictionary definition of boundaries is, which is a line that marks the limits of an area, a dividing line. So that dividing line, immediately I think of property. You ever know when you go to purchase a property, you can go down to the commissioner's office or the tax commissioner's office and they give you an aerial view of the property you're about to purchase, and they can tell you where the property lines are. That tells you what belongs to whatever your neighbor or whoever owns the property next to you, what is theirs, and that tells you what's yours. It tells you where your property starts or ends and where theirs begins. When you talk about that in terms of relationship, it tells you what belongs to you and what does not belong to you. To your question, though, why we buck, just think of like when we were first born, right? Your parents told you, as soon as you got your legs, Tanya started laughing because she a parent, she know, right? As soon as you got your legs, that meant freedom, right? But as soon as you, in your mind, are thinking about freedom, they put this crib around you to protect you. Even before you get your legs, they put you in this thing called a crib. That's to protect you from all the dangers while your you might have been in the kitchen cooking and you had to put the baby in the crib. I mean, what they call it, the playpen, right? They fooled you into thinking they put all kinds of stuffed animals and things in there to make you think that like, oh, this was a good place to be. But really it was for your protection. The minute that you got that your legs and learned how to climb over that, right? I remember when Nico finally found out his legs and he started climbing out of his crib, I had to turn the crib around to face the wall and keep the high side up for his protection. Why? Because while we were sleeping, he was getting out of his crib at night and we could see him. If I happened to wake up, I could see him on the monitor. We are always in a position where we want freedom. Freedom to have freedom to get out the crib and move around. Freedom to walk. When you became a teenager, you wanted to have the freedom to go where you wanted to go, to do what you wanted to do, right? And not have any restrictions. But what I've come to realize, we buck because we want freedom. That's the reason why we buck. But what I also found out is that freedom is not freedom unless you have responsibility.
I had said this before. I said, if you sacrifice your character for freedom, it's not freedom, it's an upgraded prison.
Come on, bruh.
If you sacrifice your character for freedom, it's not really freedom, it's an upgraded prison.
Come on.
But, okay, Tanya, I want you to touch on this. Because some people hear the word boundaries, they think rules, they think restrictions, like Quest is saying, which is true. But why are we looking at these boundaries in terms of relationships negatively? Like, oh my God, this person's trying to control me. Every time I got to tell them where they are, I got to check in, and maybe they might not say it with that type of demeanor, but in our minds, we're thinking of it and viewing it like boundaries are negative.
Well, sometimes I think it's like feeling like they have to give up something of themselves. And I don't think people like that concept. But the reality is that in anything, any relationship, there has to be some level of change. But change isn't necessarily bad. Change can be good. It's just that people automatically think, nobody's going to change me. I'm going to be who I am. And it brings up a guard. It brings up a defense. When in reality, it's about building. It's about respect. For me, one of the things that I realized about me and my personality type, I don't like people telling me what to do. I really had to own that. I was like, I really don't. I like to have a level of freedom. But I also had to realize with that, no matter even if I'm at work or if I'm consulting and I'm reporting to somebody, I still got to respect their leadership. It doesn't mean that they're controlling me. It's respect. Mm-hmm. That's all it is. Mm-hmm. And I just really think most people feel like they're giving up something of themselves to gain a relationship. However, if you value the relationship, there has to be some level of mutualism.
What's going on, beautiful people? I'm sorry I had to interrupt your value time, but people have been asking me, Jamel, how do I support the Value Podcast? I want to show some love. Well, you can go to VPAPOV.com. That's VPAPOV.com and grab yourself some value gear. And for those that have been watching and they say, man, I like this wisdom, I like the conversations that's taking place, how can I work with you one-on-one? You can go to JamelDJackson.com. That's JamelDJackson.com. Click the link, head to the website. Let's work together. I want to see you have the best, amazing, healthy relationships in your life. Back to the podcast.
I would say a level of reciprocity.
Me and my barber was saying this morning. I got a new understanding. Relationships are gifts.
Absolutely.
Relationships are gifts. Mm-hmm. You are a gift to me. I am a gift to you. Quest is a gift to me. I am a gift. We are all gifts. Mm-hmm. If there's no boundaries, I won't respect your gift. Mm-hmm. I won't respect you as a gift. Then I'll never be able to unlock what's inside of you. Mm-hmm. Quest, come on, man. Why are these boundaries? I think it has to do something with the upbringing. Because I don't think we just become adults and all of a sudden we I don't want nobody to control me.
No, let's just keep it 100. We just want freedom. We want freedom. Like I said before, We want freedom as we're growing up. When we get to the level of what you were talking about a while ago in terms of relationships, and of course we're talking about romantic relationships,
Yeah.
and then moving on to the you know what I'm saying, the institution of marriage, right? We want the freedom to have that kind of relationship. We want the freedom to have that kind of marriage. Let me say this before I jump into it. When my daughter was getting to the age of wanting to drive a car, right? 16. She was doing some stuff in school, like legit, Jamel, I almost, like I'm going to hang this young lady. Because, like, for real, she ain't got me to the point, Tanya, where I'm cussing. You know what I'm saying? Like, the man of God was cussing because some of the stuff she was doing at school, I was like, I'm going to kill you, right? You are not, number one, like, I didn't send you to that school for the school to affect you. I taught you what I taught you so that you can go into that school and its environment and affect the environment and not the other way around. One day she came to me because she's getting of age, that time where she wanted to get her permit and stuff, and she was like, Daddy, I think it's time for me to drive. And I was like, no. I used another adjective, but I was like, no. Why? Because you're irresponsible. And if I put you behind the wheel of a 2-ton car with the kind of absence of responsibility that you have right now, you're going to kill yourself and take a whole bunch of other people with you, right? 6 months later, a year later, because there was a 6-month situation where she wanted to go back and live with her moms. She found out some stuff, and then she ended up coming back to me. When she came back to me, Jamel, I promise you, it was like a night and day situation. She started doing better in school. It was right after COVID. She started doing better in school. She started handling her responsibilities. When she came to me, she went and got herself a little job at Old Navy. She started putting away money to the point where she saved $2,000, right? She had a little boyfriend. I was working through it, you know what I'm saying? And when she would come home, her curfew was 11 o'clock. It would be 10:55, and she's coming off the exit. Daddy, I'll be home in 5 minutes. I said, okay, good. Showing me all the things that I needed to see. And as soon as she started doing those things, I started opening it up. Took her to go get her permit. Started teaching her to drive every day. She's now about to go and get her license. What am I saying? You cannot have true freedom without responsibility. You cannot have that relationship. You cannot have that life. You can't live in that house. You can't drive that kind of car until you adopt the responsible principles that will allow you to have those things. That's the reason why boundaries are a problem for people, because you want freedom, but you don't want the responsibilities in order to gain that kind of freedom. You want stuff. You want there's a lot of people in love with the thought of being in love. But the minute that you have to take a lemon squeeze from your, I was just talking to us about it a while ago. The minute that you got to take a lemon squeeze from your spouse and it don't feel good, you start getting in your feelings, you start criticizing, you start stonewalling. In other words, we not talking. Why? Because you knee deep in your feelings now. Not understanding that if I just operate in the fullness of trust and be a mature individual, that we really could work through this, right? But that's the thing. That's a boundary, though. That's a boundary for me to sit here and say, listen, I'm going to do relationship. But if you're not going to talk to me about this, then I'm not going to, you know what I'm saying? Because I can't control you, but I can control me. I'm going to continue talking to you, but I'm not going to force you to do it.
So
Yeah, I want to kind of add a little bit to it, because I kind of work on the other side where I work with women to help them heal.
Okay.
And what happens is, that sounds good in theory to be vulnerable. But what I find is that many have difficulty being vulnerable with themselves, like getting deep. One of the things that I just experience from just the women I've had the pleasure of working with is the trauma. And what happens is it does stem from childhood. And what happens is, what we must understand is our experiences, our circumstances, our upbringing, the environment that we have been exposed to shapes how we function in relationships. I know we want to say, man, when I get this relationship, this is how I'm going to be. But there's a lot of things you have to unlearn as well as learn to be able to see clearly on how to set proper boundaries, because people can set very unhealthy boundaries too. Well, I don't want nobody to get close to me. that can be an unhealthy boundary in a relationship, because there's only but so much you're going to pour into it due to your own level of dysfunction or hurt. And so that detox that many people bypass is a huge issue in relationships, because of what they saw, what they were told, and they operate on a subconscious level, right? Because again, 95% of us are subconsciously on autopilot. We're on autopilot most of the time. And so going into that place of awareness, meaning that I have to now go into a place of consciousness and really identify maybe some of the unhealthy behaviors that I've been taught, not because it was intentional either. All things were not intentional. Some things were. Some of the things that I have heard, I honestly have cried as a coach on the back end. The stuff that I have heard has really surprised me on why, and I'm only speaking for the women I've worked with and the women that I talk to, it will be hard to be fully present due to that weight, right? And so what ends up happening is that chances are, due to your trauma, you might attract someone else who gives you the trauma that you grew up on. It's deep. So setting boundaries is like the surface, but the roots is the things that we have to dig deep about. We can't overlook that process. I tell people that all the time. You cannot skip it. You can't bypass it. It's going to show up in some form in your life.
So what we're talking about is before we move on and cross this bridge into couple or collectively being together, I hear both of you talking about this individualism.
Absolutely.
First, as an individual, I have to understand my own boundaries.
And not only that, you got to set boundaries on yourself.
On yourself.
So Jamel, real quick, because Tanya dropped some heavy stuff a while ago, and I think we need to just take a little deeper step into boundaries. Boundaries is not something that you put on other people, because you can only put boundaries on things that you can enforce. Right. What am I saying? You can't control other people. When I put a fence around my yard, my fence that I put around my yard is not for the purposes of me controlling what's going on in my neighbor's yard. If they plant begonias in their flower bed, I don't have the right to go over there and say, I don't like these begonias and pull them up. That yard don't belong to me. That's, first of all, why boundaries are important, because it lets you know what's yours, what belongs to you, and what does not belong to you, right? So with that being said, when I put up a boundary, it's more so to protect the things that are on the inside. Sometimes, in the best interest of myself and my health, I need to put boundaries on myself. In other words, I can put boundaries on me because I can control me. You will not go into another relationship if you do not get A, B, and C together. If you do, you are going to cause carnage and leave behind a whole bunch of damage.
Yeah, it's about sticking to your own promises.
Do you guys believe that when I'm setting these boundaries for myself, a person setting these boundaries for themselves as an individual, do you believe that healthy boundaries, that it can rub off on the next person?
It can, but it also I don't know if it rubs off, but it definitely teaches other people how to treat you and give them an idea, or it should inspire others. Because let's say if with me and Faith being in relationship the way that we are, right? 10 years of marriage. If she says to me, like, I don't want you to talk to me like that anymore. You can't talk to me like that anymore. That's not a boundary. That's a feeble attempt to control me so that I can stop doing the thing that's affecting her. But if she says to me, anytime that you talk to me like that again, I'm just going to get up and leave the room. That's a boundary. Why? Because she can't control me, but she can't control her own self. And it's enforceable, right? When we put those boundaries in place, what it does is it lets me know that I can't treat her the way that I'm treating her. It's not working for the relationship. And if I continue to do it, there will be limits and consequences soon to follow. But if I honor it and she knows that I'm honoring her boundary, her fondness grows of me. Because really and truly, I could have went left field and said, ain't nobody trying to hear that foolishness. I ain't doing none of that.
Yeah, you have to be on a different vibration to receive that, though.
That's
because
what
happens is you can say that, but you got to know the type of person you're dealing with. And I say this because you do have just toxic people.
Yeah.
You have narcs. You have people who will manipulate that and use that. And so I do believe it all depends on the emotional intelligence and spiritual foundation that a person has.
No doubt.
Right? To be able to accept that boundary and not try to control it or manipulate it, right? So I just like to speak on the other side because I do work on that side of the equation. And so I see, I understand your point, but yeah, and they can have those type of conversations intelligently, right? Because there's a level of work individually that was done to be able to come collectively to be able to do that. But when you're talking about, a person who's really in a false sense of control because of their own insecurity, that might not work very well.
But see,
you know what I mean? Because they'll do a lot of love bombing, things of that nature. Yeah.
The good part about it is, though, with every boundary, your door is a boundary. The gate on your fence around the house is a boundary. So you get to usher in and usher out what you want to keep in and what you want to leave. When you set those boundaries and you're dealing with toxic people, and because there are people who will habitually overstep their boundaries.
Oh, for sure, because they don't like it.
Absolutely. But
right.
That's an indicator of, okay, once, yep, I've warned you about it, you crossed it. 2, again, 3rd time, okay, that's the limit, and now follows the consequence. I can't tell you how many couples that I've coached where a husband did a particular thing that was not conducive. The wife, or vice versa, the husband let the wife know. I remember one situation in particular where the wife had had enough. She had reached her limit. You know what the consequence was? She took her kids and moved out and was living with a family member. You know what happened? 6 months of him not with his wife, he finally got his stuff together, and now they are back together and working on, I think, their 2nd year of marriage after being married for 3 years.
One thing that I've learned is that a lot of us go in not stating our needs.
Boundary.
You know what I mean? And so I'm going to respectfully say that, when I look back on going through my divorce, I had to take the lessons, right? I had to. And one of the biggest lessons that I learned was that I never made my needs very clear. I assumed that you knew. You were supposed to know. Or I felt like I'm going to start this way, and then eventually they'll get it. So I kind of had a false expectation. And because the outcome didn't meet that expectation, I became resentful, angry, and then I started to not respect that person. So I learned that about myself. And so now I have to go into a place of consciousness and make sure that I'm mindful on letting you know what I need, because I'm a very high D. I'm a person that I'm just going to do it. That's just kind of like how I function. Like if I see something, I'm going to do something. But it's okay to say, you know what? Yeah, I do need this. Or yes, I do need that. Or you know what? I don't like it when this happens. This makes me feel X, Y, and Z. As opposed to letting it build up and then I explode one day over the smallest little thing. And so, again, setting boundaries, but sticking to my promise. That was probably the most important thing, sticking to my promise. My promises that I made to myself, no matter how tough it is, because what happens is people love to tell you to set boundaries, but it comes with something. It's going to cost you something. So here's the truth. When you start loving yourself, when you start truly loving the person who you are to your core, you better believe that the same people that you have around you, they may not be there. Why? Because now your new boundaries cut off their benefits. And so what happens is a lot of people don't want that. They don't want the strife. They don't want no conflict.
But true or not, it lets you know who should be in your, because I'm a firm believer that people come into your life for a reason, season, and a lifetime. That lets you know, because you set boundaries according to your values.
Absolutely,
right?
You do.
So what what is important to you? If what you're doing is not consistent with what's important to me and how I live my life,
right,
chances are you may not necessarily need to be in my life for the long haul.
True, but here's the thing. That's not always easy when it's your parents. It's not always easy when it's your spouse. Like, we have to think. I'm not talking about social media friends here. I'm talking about people who have given you life, people who have helped you. You're talking about setting a boundary with maybe a toxic mother or a toxic father. That is a whole different type of ball game. A sibling, a best friend that you've been rocking with, and that comes really differently now.
You said the word. You said it costs.
Oh, it costs you something.
Here's the thing.
It costs you a lot.
My mom always used to say this, and I know you guys heard this. It's a simple term. Jamel, at some point you're gonna get sick and tired of being sick and tired.
Absolutely.
And when you saying those boundaries where people, you start setting these boundaries that's taking you to the next level, and now individuals around you see that they can't get the benefits that they used to get, whether the benefits was like a leech sucking life out of you, you can't get that no more. And of course, yes, it is touchy when it's mom and when it's dad and when that's my brother and this is my friend I grew up with. This is my road dog right here. But let me tell you, I had to do that. I had to set boundaries with some close. Now they're associates. God has given me new friends.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? Now they're associates. I still love them. I respect them. I speak to them. But there has to be boundaries because where I'm going, did it hurt? It actually stung. But I was like, it cost. But it's for the benefit of my
Absolutely.
future.
The cost
and it's
is
not
the benefit.
easy. But for
Of
those that's
course.
listening and watching, trust me, it's worth it.
It's worth it, absolutely. So you have to let them, it's one of the things about, you got to paint a picture to people. You can't just say set boundaries. That's too vague. You got to start getting deep on what this is really costing you to the root, right? Because what happens is people think like having a high EQ is so important, and I think people overlook this part. But what happens is when you don't set boundaries with the person who's overstepping their boundaries, someone else takes the heat of that. Whether that's your children, whether that's your spouse,
Somebody has to
it
pay
comes from something. So that's why I tell people, you gotta be mindful of your triggers to know where it's coming from. When you feel like someone is not respecting you and you're constantly taking that and you acting like it's all good, somebody's getting the end of that.
Let me tell you this.
But that's what I'm
Quest-
saying.
hold
We
on,
end
Quest.
up paying the price for it, and the cost is not put on the person who it needs to be put on.
Right, exactly.
You know what I'm saying?
The boundaries are not being set. Somebody infiltrates. Question, I'm in a relationship, you're in a relationship. You don't set that boundary for that woman that's probably all googly-eyed in your face or doing something on Instagram. It's going to impact your entire family.
Oh, sooner or later.
Absolutely.
costs.
It costs you something, absolutely.
And it may not be a woman, but I want to use as an example for men that are watching this and men that are listening, because there needs to be boundaries. You're in a relationship. You can't just be texting everybody you want to text. You can't just be visiting everybody you want to visit.
Let me say this to that point too, Jamel. I think with us, we want once again, this is the reason why I'm saying that you cannot have these kinds of relationships. Freedom is the byproduct of responsibility. Let's just keep it 100. There are going to be some decisions that you are going to have to make in this life. They're going to be difficult, they're going to be challenging, and they're going to be painful. And they will be consistent with growth if you do them halfway healthy. You understand? I think what we want is we want these end results without difficulty and challenge. Growth does not happen that way. There are going to be some people that are closest to you that you are going to have to walk out of their lives and never see them again. Because at the end of the day, remember what we said before in terms of misplaced values. You can't say, I value this, but you still holding on to this relationship that is counterproductive to what you're trying to achieve in terms of this value. If I value this with any intensity or fervency, I got to let this go because this is not allowing me to achieve. Here's the funny thing. I have to set the boundaries too, because if you are habitually crossing the line and I'm not saying anything about it, I am partly to blame. To your point, right? If I am not, okay, I do conferences and we go places and stuff, and this is conversations that I've had with Faith all the time. Tanya, I promise you, people will slide up in your DM, right? People will send you or talk to you at the conference and be like, touching your, sweetheart, I would really appreciate if you didn't touch me like that because I'm married. And I'm not saying that you're trying to, but it will send the wrong message if other people see it. You understand what I'm saying? Like, that's setting the boundary. And if you do it, then I'm just going back up and send a message. I'm going to take one step back and let you know without saying it that, you know what I'm saying, to save my feelings and save yours. The second time I got to do it, though, sweetheart, I asked you to, and if I see you anywhere else again, I'm going to just move in a complete opposite direction. Why? Because I can't control you. But what I can control is me.
Yeah, when it comes to the covenant, one thing that I have learned, even though I'm no longer married, we got to honor what we've decided to walk into.
Oh, come on.
I don't look for other people to respect it first. That's something we have to really do honor. and value. Like, I have to value the relationship in order to do that. Because if not, you leave the door open for people to come in. Also, something you said that I want to also kind of piggyback on, relationship management is one of the things that I teach highly. Learning how to compartmentalize people. There are going to be some people you totally need to like just cut loose. But then there are people that may not be the case. And I'm not talking about exes, I'm talking about family. Because the reality is that a lot of our habits, a lot of our how we tend to function has stemmed from these environments. And so relationship management, I have had clients who have had toxic mothers. It's not as easy to just cut your mother off, right? So it's thing of saying, okay, can you stay with her for a few days? If not, don't do it. Be mindful of the conversations you have with her because you already know how she is, right? Things like that to set boundaries, because there's a level of guilt you might feel by doing this, because it's the loyalty that we have attached to pain. You know what I mean? Like, this is my mom. So, we got blood thicker than water, even if it's toxic and dysfunctional. So setting a boundary would mean that I hate my mom, when that's really not the case, but that's the perception because of the fact that that's this person's parent. So that's why all of that stuff is really important to kind of understand and manage, because the reality is that you have people who truly, I would say, care about what other people think. They're not as aggressive at setting boundaries as I am. And so I have to take that into consideration when I'm working with people, based upon personality types and what they've been through too. What they've been through is always going to impact how they function. It may not trigger them as to the highest capacity where it did once before, because that's where the healing comes in. Right. But because they experience a high level of trauma, it's still going to have some form of an impact.
Quest, did you start out like that? When you were saying that, I'm at the conference, just using the conference again as an illustration, or it could have been another scenario. Did you always start out as being that strong and setting the boundaries? Like, you can't do that, or I'm not answering that, or I'm not talking to that person. Okay. Especially, and I'm going down this lane because I'm in the marketplace and I engage in conversations with a lot of men, and this word boundaries again is looked at as a rule or law to control me. What you mean I can't go out and have dinner with these particular women or go do this? It's not. I'm not doing anything. This is what they saying.
Yeah, I got something to say about that as a woman.
I'll just say this.
And I want to hear your side too.
I'll just say this, that like an affair never starts in a bedroom.
Okay.
You feel me? An affair does not start in a bedroom. An affair starts long before you even get to the bedroom. It is that, shift in how you communicate. I'm a loving dude. I love people. And you fit Tanya know, like I'm a high eye. I'm a high D, but I lean more to my high I than I do to my D, right? If we need to get something done, I'd rather lean to my I to get the minute that I'm not getting results, then I switch to my D. You feel me? So that's me. One of my failures, I don't know if I necessarily, for lack of a better word, I'll say failures, is communicating that in relationships. But I've seen one too many people fall victim to the outcome of that whole thing. Did I always start out that way? No. But I've had brothers who I was very close to, who were men of God, who would see me operate in certain environments and say, Quest, you ain't doing nothing. Let me just remind you, you ain't doing nothing. But I see the way that you respond, and they may not be handling it with the same idea that you handling it with. And you could lightweight send the wrong message, and then before you know it, they pressing you in ways that you don't want to be pressed, right? And so I realized that I need to set safeguards, and not just because sometimes let me keep it 100. Yeah. For the dudes that got the most integrity and the most in character in the world, they are not infallible. Mm-hmm. You put them in the right situation with the right ingredients and they will fall victim. I'm not trying to find out what that line is. Mm. So I set up safeguards. My whole team, whenever we go anywhere, if you see me talking to a woman who looking like in any way, shape, or form for more than 5-10 minutes, come and run me some interference. For the most part, I try to take faith on every trip that I go to when it deals with conference stuff. Like, you know what I'm saying, we coming to do this, all right, it's good because all my peoples that I'm interacting with anyway. But when we go do conferences, when it's a lot going on and stuff like that, you gotta be able to put the safeguards in place. Yo, the enemy is cunning, bro.
Hold you saying that, because I hear somebody saying, well, man, you ain't strong enough.
What do you mean strong enough?
Everybody falls victim to
Yo,
the flesh. Look at David in the Bible. Like
But that's what I'm saying,
everybody.
Tanya.
It doesn't. The thing is that even when David, however, David was still one thing David was still a man after God's
And before
heart.
you say that, Tanya, the word says that he was. No, stay right there. Stay right there. The word declares that he was smart. He was prudent in matters. It ran down the list of all the things David was. And he's, okay, yeah, go on.
Yeah, I mean, the reality is that it's not about, we all fall victim to the flesh. It's easy to do. I mean, the reality is that, people are still attractive. They don't become unattractive because all of a sudden you marry. The goal isn't to go out there and, like he said, I'm purposely going out to look for it. No, it's just that, okay, if you see that this is happening, then you need to come and interfere. Like, I know this is kind of, it ain't even really off topic. I don't know if you guys saw that whole documentary with Kevin Hart. And he went to Las Vegas and he ended up cheating on his wife. And my whole thing is, dude, why would you put yourself in that position knowing that it's just you going, none of your boys are going, you're going to put yourself in that position and being the man that you are as far as your, where you are in your career. That was not a good, intelligent move, right? Not saying, that was just my personal opinion. I felt like you shouldn't have went. You should have just stayed your behind at the house and not even went, knowing that the flesh can just be weak. It's just what it is. He's Kevin Hart. He got money. It's just attractive to people. Now, kind of going back on what you said about, here's something else that I have learned too, because I want to speak on both sides. Because one thing I've learned is that I never want to feel like, or never make it seem like, it's men who got to do this. Yes, but I also think we have an accountability too as women. And I want you to touch on that. And the reason why I say this is because the reality is a lot of us know who we marry, whether we want to own it or not. We may say we don't know. We don't want to know.
Watch out.
Okay, so what this means is that we see things that we just don't want to see. We want to overlook. We want to turn that red flag into a green flag.
Watch your
And so
mouth.
what happens is we basically get upset more so because we saw it and we ignored it. And I'm telling you this because one of the biggest things, it's not even about the women I coach. I'm in these groups. A lot of people knew. They knew. They already know. And I know a lot of people don't talk about this too from a biblical standpoint. Everybody's not mature enough to be married. You have to be mature. And I think people forget that part. You have to be mature, right? You can be a great person.
Yes, sir.
You can be a great worker. You can be intelligent. That does not mean you're ready to be a husband. Or you may not be ready to be a wife. There's a level of a certain kind of maturity on both sides that needs to be developed. And I know sometimes we don't want to talk about that, but
you're on the Value Podcast, so you can
well,
talk about
one of the things you already know
Let's
I am,
go,
and
man.
one of the things that I talk about is the importance of ownership. The reality was for me, and I didn't want to own this. I was a fixer-upper. I wanted to change you. I wanted to fix you the way I wanted to fix you. And because the project didn't turn out as planned, I was upset. But it was there all along. And so what I'm saying is that I'm not saying people deserve it, but what I am saying is that when you see something and it's obvious that it's there, don't think that your love can make them change. That is a very bad expectation to have, because when that expectation doesn't meet the outcome, it forms an unhealthy narrative about men, about relationships, all that type of jazz. Because unfortunately, we're taught as women, well, just, stick around and pray about it. And, just keep loving on him. He'll get that mess right there. See, I tell women, listen, don't do that. And so what happens is when you get married, now you feel obligated now because you don't want to feel embarrassed. You don't want to hear nobody say, I told you so. You don't want to feel ashamed. And so you'll just stay knowing that you should have never got married.
So let's say this. Before even we get to that marriage stage, because I'm dealing with a lot of people that may be preparing for it, or
Yeah.
in that dating phase, that girlfriend, boyfriend phase, I believe that we should have, and these are difficult conversations to have.
Absolutely.
But they're healthy conversations where we're sitting down and we discuss boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
How are you going, if you're talking to your significant other, your girlfriend or your boyfriend, how are we going to react, or how are we going to be if the ex comes along? Or when social, because now we live in a technology age, so social media plays a role in this.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
How are you safeguarding the friends you have on social media? How, you know what I'm saying? Because are we having these conversations? Because if not, like you said, you'll see the flags, you'll ignore it in the dating phase, and then the relationship starts to mature, and then you're like, man, he always on his phone. Who you talking to? I don't want you on your phone like that.
Yeah, control. But, you know, first and foremost, Jay, one of the things that we have an inability to do before we get into relationship is the inability to self-assess. Right? I think Polonius said it best when he said, to thine own self be true. You know it's some stuff with you. Like, people think that because I'm a coach, that I don't deal with stuff. I'm a human just like everybody else. Just because I've learned some practices, principles, and policies over the years that have allowed me to properly navigate in my relationship, because I have learned how to put safeguards in place, does not mean that I don't deal with my own stuff. I deal with temptation just like everybody else does. I just handle it differently. That's, I think, one of the things that are key. It's not what happens to us in life. It's how we respond to what happens to us in life.
Right. And this is why you have to know not to rely on your own power.
Okay,
this
good.
is when you have to go to a higher power.
And
because
knowing who you are. Because
you have to.
Even when he just said that, you know, even for those who are listening and those who are viewing, you may not even believe in these principles, but they still apply.
Oh, yeah,
Absolutely.
no doubt.
You have Jesus in this particular story,
no
and the
doubt.
devil's tempting him.
Yeah.
3 times.
Yep.
And then the third time, Jesus says, look, man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that comes out of his mouth. And in that equation, in that scenario, the devil's testing his identity.
Okay. So you said something now, and this is what it triggers this whole thing, right?
Let's go.
That's how you know it's real. You
This
like,
kind of
okay.
stuff excites me
Let's
because
go.
really and truly, it really does cause us to take a look in the mirror. You said social media a while ago when you were talking about Jesus and the whole temptation process. He knew exactly who he was, what he was here to do, and by nothing was going to, even when he went to the garden and looked death in the face, he said, if there was any way that you could pull this cup away from me, he said, nevertheless, not my will, but thy will be done. He had a full, complete grasp and understanding of what he was here to do, and by any means necessary, he was carrying that out.
Yeah.
If we took the time to understand who we are and what we are here for, what we were created to do, half the stuff that we deal with, we wouldn't be dealing with in terms of relationship. The enemy is a master manipulator in terms of distraction. And if you got to think about, okay, by the time you have actually identified the distraction, you've been distracted all long before that, right? And so what he does is gets us into things like social media where you see things like hashtag relationship goals. And half the stuff that you see is artificial, right? And so we got people thinking that this is the way that you develop relationships, such to the point that you think the artificial is the real. And when you taste the real, it tastes nasty to you or it's unappealing to you. Why? Because the artificial has become the real. You understand what I'm telling you? Relationship, I think we were talking about it earlier on in terms of marriage. Like, I'm for biblical marriage. And then when you find out what biblical marriage is, you're like, I'm not for biblical marriage. You know what I'm saying? Like, for real. One of the things that we must learn how to do is to self-assess. When you are honest with yourself and you are honest with your weaknesses, the word of God declares it is at your weakest point that my strength is made perfect.
Come on.
When you understand who you are, and simply who you are not. Like, that's the reason why when you were saying, like, when we go to conferences, I know who I am, bruh. Like, I used to be in the music business, and I'm not glorifying it or in any way, shape, or form, but when Ludacris was like in every area code, I'm sure my name came up in that list somewhere. You feel me? Right. But now that we're in this place and space, I have to be honest with, although that is not my lifestyle, like, there's a chance that I still can go back to that. That's why the boundaries that I set for myself have to be in place. If I don't, I can fall victim to to the same stuff. Pastors is falling victim to it. Yeah.
Absolutely. Like it's amazing because I say the same thing. It's just certain places I don't go to. Just because it doesn't align with who I am becoming. It just don't work.
It costs.
Right. I say I just can't. And I know, and it's just what it is. I don't explain it. I just know what I need to do. Right. And so women have to set boundaries too. It's not, I've learned that you got married men that'll slide in your DM. Ooh. And see, that's the thing. And see, that part, and see, for me, I'm that person, I just don't respond. Mm-hmm. That's me. I don't even give you the ability that's okay. I don't respond. I don't say anything. Some people, you're so crazy. That right there, you opening up a door. See, but for me, I value that though. That's just me and my character. But what I also know is that some women truly don't care. They don't. They don't care. They know that man is married. And people be talking about this girl code. That's a whole different conversation. But the reality is that you will have women that will entertain a married man with no problem. And you will have married men will slide in your DM. Oh,
no problem.
You know what? I hear another story in my head when we're talking about the cost. And for somebody that may be watching this or even listening, and you are battling with boundaries or you have failed because you didn't set boundaries, God still loves you. You can get back up and you can try again. Before I make the statement, I just wanted to make that disclaimer. But we're talking about these boundaries and how much it costs. This story just came to my mind. Once again, another biblical analogy that can be used in practical sense, where the people were saying, Jesus, I'm going to follow you. I got you. I'm following you. And he makes this statement. He says, foxes have dens.
He don't even got a place to lay his doggone head. But
he said foxes have dens. The Son of Man has no place to lay his head.
Come on now.
Now, here's the thing.
Come on now.
I don't believe it was that Christ didn't have a place to lay his head. He's painting this analogy almost like, okay, right out the gate, foxes have dens dealing with a place to live. Meaning he like, you gonna roll with me? It's gonna be a chance that the circumstances is gonna get rugged right out the gate. It's gonna cost you to roll with me. So we enter in these relationships and it's like, it's gonna cost. Yep. He was setting boundaries right there, right out the gate. He said, look, foxes got dens. Mm-hmm. Birds have nests. The Son of Man got no place to lay his head. He's basically saying, like, if you roll with me, there's a possibility.
It's gonna stuff you gotta give up.
It's gonna be some stuff you gotta give up. It's gonna get funky. It's gonna get tight. It may be challenging, but we gonna win. Because then after that, he starts talking about building.
Right.
He said nobody builds something without first calculating the cost.
Right. And I think it's
so
also
nobody won't look at him and say if you start building and you don't finish it, they say, look at that fool.
Yeah.
So really, when we put in these boundaries and when you set boundaries for yourself, you realizing that it's going to cost.
Let me speak to that after Tanya. Go ahead, Tanya, because
I was just gonna say that I think people have this mindset that once I get in a relationship, I could just flip a switch and everything that I used to do is just gonna stop. Wow. That may be the intention, but the reality is that we have developed a level of mental inventory.
Talk to me.
Right? Whatever that is, right? I mean, and this is why I said what I said earlier, that a woman's love cannot make a man change, because a lot of the time, let's just say infidelity is in the play. And one of the things that I am an advocate of is not tying a person's action to the fact that you weren't enough. A lot of the time, it probably has nothing to do with you, right? It's the mindset that people have when it comes to being with another person. Like some people, they feel like that's their right. Some people feel like, like, I know this is crazy, but that whole thing with Amber Rose and her boyfriend has said, I can do good for like 6 months. And then after that, I mean, I'm just naturally, I just want other women, right? That's his philosophy. Even though we may not like it, but the reality is this man is saying that I can't be with just one woman. That has nothing to do with the woman and the love that she gives him. You can give him anything. You can be everything that he wants, but that doesn't mean that he's going to just be with only you. It has nothing to do with you. It has everything to do with his philosophy behind it all and and what he wants to do. And so a lot of the time we think we can control it by, man, if I just keep loving him and giving him what he needs, he'll eventually get it. He actually won't. You'll actually allow yourself to get hurt because you got this ideal story that you need to divorce yourself from. So it's the ideal versus the real. I always tell my clients, what was the real story and what are you telling yourself? Because chances are they are totally different. I mean, and this doesn't say that a person was bad. It's not saying that. Yeah. It's just saying that, is it really matching with what was really there? Or are we allowing ourselves to ignore it because we want it to be what we've already visualized it to be? That's all.
So Tanya, what are some boundaries as a woman that you would suggest to other women that are watching or listening, healthy boundaries to set if they're in a relationship, whether it's marriage or just in a relationship, a long-term relationship or even starting a relationship, some healthy boundaries? Because here's the thing, I run into couples and singles and I ask questions and people are like, especially because I'm saying technology, because we're in a technical society, where it's like people are like, no, he can't touch my phone, she can't touch my phone. And I'm not saying that we're talking about access now. You know what I mean? You can't, I'm my own woman. And then, Crest, you could touch on it, I'm my own man. You don't gotta know all that. And I'm going on a trip with my girls and I'm going on a trip with the fellas. I ain't gotta tell you where I'm going.
And learning some things that you've been taught, what you've been told that really isn't true, right? But the more we replay that and the more that becomes our narrative, it becomes our truth. And we forget that we have the ability to change the narrative. And so when we go into that part, then I believe that that's when we can start setting boundaries. Because this is what I do with my clients. Because a lot of the times I can tell you to do this, but are you going to do it? Chances are you're not. Why? Because you haven't developed a deep self-love yet. And that's where it really goes down into doing. Real talk. It just does. Like, that self-love it's people say it, they quote it, but it's a very tough journey to show up and be your most authentic self. That takes a lot of courage to do.
So, Quest, how you balancing that self-love if you're in a relationship, though?
I'm a firm believer. You said something a while ago, like I'm going on a trip with my boys or whatever the case may be. I think, and I hope I'm saying this word correctly, separateness or separatedness breeds togetherness if it's done correctly or in a healthy manner in relationship. People think that just because two people come together to form one, that you're still not individuals. There's things that I like to do with my fellas. Like, you see Faith is not here right now. I enjoy doing this kind of stuff with my people. You understand what I'm telling you? And being away from my wife for 2-3 days, when I'm FaceTiming her, there's a fondness that grows. Like they said, the heart grows in absence or grows fond in absence. When I go home on Saturday, not to not get TMI, but like it's going down when I get home. You feel me? Like, why? Because I've been away from, my beloved for 2-3 days, and I enjoy doing this. But once this is over, it's time to go back. And so I'm a firm believer in that. You need to have girls' trips with healthy people, though.
What I'm looking at is how we're communicating it to one another when we're in a relationship. You know what I'm saying? If the woman is like, I'm going out with my girls, I'm going on a trip with my women, don't ask me where I'm going. This is where I'm going. And the fellas having the same type of, man, I'm going out with the guys. You ain't got to ask me where I'm going.
We said it just earlier on, right? 53% of marriages end in divorce. Number one cause, communication and communication-related issues.
And then understanding the message behind the message. Right? Even though that may be the approach, what's really going on when you say that? What is the trigger that makes you think that's how you have to approach it? Right? Because the thing is that some people, we're doing relationships differently, right? Like we talked earlier, you got people like my parents, they got 50 years under the belt, right? But people now are getting remarried. They, and so what happens is that residue, especially if you've been hurt and been controlled, you feel like, I ain't gonna never let nobody do me wrong. So you go in already jaded because you feel like somebody's gonna do you wrong.
Now it's like a dictatorship to you,
it
even
is.
though it's not. That's not how it's being delivered. You accepting it like they trying to control me.
Right, just getting behind the message. Like, why do you feel to do that? Because I'm not going to let nobody control me. Well, why do you feel like they're trying to control you? Because I had the same problem in my past. That's what it
Stories,
is.
thoughts, and
It's
programs.
not, it's deeper than just the approach. The approach is coming from somewhere. It's coming from some narrative or something that happened that we haven't looked at, right? Because that's what it is. I know that's what we not want to own. It's getting deep. It's asking yourself, well, why do I feel like this person is controlling me? Is that really the truth? Or is that what I've created it to be, right? So just knowing that part is so vital, right? Because I had to realize that even with myself. Like, I'm just going to do it myself. Ain't nobody here to help me. That right there, that killed a lot of things for me. Right, and I realized like my perspective was more about, because other people didn't come through for me, that everybody else was going to be the same way, and so I was already holding people to a standard or to something that they didn't even do, and so that's why I say the healing is so important, because we got to get the message behind the actual message.
I want to assassinate this while we're talking about it, because I love where Tanya's going with it in terms of the healing and the depth and the natural perspective. But I also know that there's a spirit behind it.
Oh, for sure.
So where's this spirit coming from? Outside of, of course, our upbringing, but let's take it behind the scenes. Let's take it behind the veil, because, Lucifer, before he was Satan, had that same type of verbiage coming out of his mouth. I will, I. And so we're in an I society where it's like, I want it my way. This is how I'm going to do it. And then when we get in relationships, remember, we like the idea of it. I like how that girlfriend, boyfriend look. I love how that husband, wife look. And I want that. So we get into it, not realizing that now your I becomes weird.
First of all, we have to understand that we do not exist on our own account. The word of God declares in Jeremiah that before I formed you in your mother's womb, I knew you. I called you out to darkness into this marvelous light. Why? So that I could make you a prophet unto the nation. So first and foremost, your purpose here is not of your own. The quicker that you are to embrace that idea in and of itself is the quicker that all of these other distractions and everything else dissipates. When I understand that as a husband, that God has ordained me to be a husband and a father and a number of other couple of things as well, that responsibility now, like for real, the word declares, delight yourself in the Lord and he will give you the desires of your heart. And a lot of the times we think it's the stuff that I want. And there's a little bit of that in there. But no, he's literally saying, delight yourself in me and I will put the desires in you that you need to have. And a lot of the times we want to fool ourselves into thinking that God put it in my spirit to want the Audi R8.
That
you understand what I'm
is
telling
very
you?
distorted
And so
for a
with
lot
that
of
being
people.
said, if I grasp that, right, and understand, then like for real, a lot of that stuff that you're talking about, kind of, I love the song. Turn your eyes upon Jesus and look full in his wonderful face, and the things of this earth will grow strangely dim in the light of his glory and grace. So as I begin to take on more of my spiritual responsibilities, then that other kind of stuff just kind of, you understand? And it's not saying that we can't want, but are what we wanting, you know what I'm saying? Is it just for us to, it's the motive behind why we want what we want. If I wanted just so I could floss on top of people and be like, yeah, you know what I'm saying, whatever the case, then God is like, you want this, and I'm not mad at you for wanting it, but you want it for the wrong reasons.
It takes a level of humility to accept even the boundaries that we may receive from God. I'll be honest, because I mean, not even say that, even without me hearing, but understanding that, okay, God doesn't want me to do this. I still want to do it. Like, nah, I still want to do it, man. And you know what I mean? That's outside of being in a relationship. This is just you as an individual. And then you might have tutors and counselors that have, this is why I believe every man needs a man over him. And every woman needs a woman over her that have insight and foresight into your life that can say, you know what, Jamel, that's not right. And here's the thing, outside of my relationship, I could get rebellious with my mentor. Like, man, this dude trying to control me. No, he just has insight. There's some things I had to humble myself as a man and say, you know what? Yes, sir. Without full understanding. Yes, sir. I don't completely understand it, but yes, sir.
So you said it a while ago. And since it's this value podcast, right? So we can talk about it. You feel me? word declares, right, that first and foremost, it's not denying that we won't have those thoughts and those feelings and those emotions that are not consistent with who we're supposed to be or who we're called to be. But when we do, we need to acknowledge the fact that we are having the thought. There's nothing wrong with having the thought because that's partly right? Because we're born in sin and shapen in iniquity. But it does say that once you realize what you're doing, you need to bring that thought captive into the knowledge of Christ, right? So in other words, when I know that I'm doing something wrong, and I was having a conversation with a doctor one time, and he was telling how cognitively thoughts come into the brain. They come in at the base of the neck, right, which is at the back of your brain, in essence. They pass through what's called the limbic system. And then from the limbic system, they go to your frontal lobe where you make all your decisions, where you're present. All of us are operating right now from our frontal lobe as we have this discussion. Our problem is that the emotions sit in the same place of your limbic system. So we literally feel before we think about what it is that we're doing. Our mistake is that when we feel it, we let our emotions sit in the decision-making seat. And I keep telling people, and I challenge all of my clients, that emotions are to be paid attention to, but they're not to be put in charge. So in essence, we feel it, right? What got David in trouble with Bathsheba is that he saw her bathing, he entertained the thought, and before he stepped back and said to himself, okay, I'm entertaining the thought where I literally want to lay down with this chick, he took a dive into his feelings and called her over to the house, and you know the rest of the story from there. A lot of the times, good or bad, when we get in a bad situation, Tanya say something, you say something to me that I don't like, I immediately feel it and I respond immediately, and we go off to left field in argument before I step back. When you were saying a while ago, is this person really trying to control me? Is this person really saying something that is detrimental or is offensive to me? We don't think about it. Emotions, left field. If you took a step back and thought about what was actually happening place, right? The word talks about it, like for real, using your mind to think through situations and be able to properly cognitively think through a situation before you come to a conclusion about what's actually happening, then we can actually get some stuff done, right? And so I think that is one of the major issues that we face in connection with what you just said. If I was able to take a step back and allow what my emotions should do is indicate that there's something is wrong, and the onus is on me because it's my feeling to investigate what is at the bottom of it all.
Wow. Listen, man, I know y'all want us to keep going, but we gotta go. It's definitely going down again, man. We never stop. We just pause. That's what I say. We never stop. We just pause. Man, I got some amazing people in here. I thank God you guys came through. Man, Tanya, I want to start with the amazing lady, the woman first. Where can the people find you that are listening? And for those that are viewing, I'm going to put your information on the video. But for the people that are listening, where can they find you at?
You can find me on Instagram and Facebook as Miss Tanya Speaks. That's MSTONYASPEAKS. You can find me there. My website, tanyacarter.com. I'm on YouTube as well as Miss Tanya Speaks. I have a podcast myself called the Reinvent You Podcast. So I'm out here in these streets, you know what I'm saying? Like I'm out in these streets, okay? So listen, y'all, I'm from the South, okay? But yeah, that's where I'm at.
Yeah.
All right. Quest.
We got tons of content out there at Quest Green on YouTube, on IG at Quest_Green. You can also find me on Facebook and Twitter at Quest Green. And by the way, conference coming up September 24th, 3L Marriage Conference, Love, Lifestyle, and Legacy is to jump off to the 120 conference. Speaking is the Sierras, Jorge and Kayla, lovely couple. E.T. will be speaking as well. His wife Dee Dee will be sitting on the panel at the end. So, yep, and then the 120 is that Saturday and Sunday. So, yeah, it's going down like full flats.
Nice. Listen, man, the Value Podcast, where valuable people attract people of value. We over and out. Peace.